council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
I'm here.
Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Snipper.
Here.
Councilmember Wright.
Y'all stay here. Here.
Okay. Are there any council comments? All right. Got nothing for the record, so we move along to adoption of minutes. Somebody would like to move adoption of the minutes from May 19th to May 22nd.
So move. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Siemens, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. I don't have any additional agenda items or any scheduling updates, so we move along to public comment. Are there any people who would like to comment on anything that is not on the regular meeting agenda tonight?
By the way, Pat Lovelace, the Tacoma Park peace advocate, has sent his regrets that he won't be able to be with us tonight because of health problems.
Okay. And anybody who would like to make any comments, please identify yourself and please try and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Jim Evans, President of the North Tacoma Citizens Association. I just wanted to make a comment, very quick comment, with respect to the presentation you're going to hear later tonight from the Montgomery College on their facilities master plan. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't maintained better contact during this initial drafting of this master plan. I think there could have been a lot of dissatisfaction avoided with this if we had maintained a little closer contact and had a little more interchange of information during the development of this current revision to their master plan. We had an opportunity at the beginning to talk to the college representatives and their architect, and then we haven't seen anything or heard anything until we got this basically what you're seeing tonight, a little different version of it, but basically what you're seeing tonight. So I'm hoping that in the future we can work a little more closely and a little more productively, because I think it's still very much in both of our interests to come out of this process with a win-win and not evolve into a confrontational situation. And also I'd like to ask if we could maybe have an opportunity to speak after the college has an opportunity, makes their presentation.
We'll see how things go and
what your time is like.
How time is running and
okay.
Try and accommodate that.
Good, thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to make public comments?
Hi, I'm Rosalind Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. We have an item tonight on the consent agenda. I just wanted to say thank you for your consideration of a letter of support. We have actually already received the grant from the state of Maryland, but the state likes assurance that we are in communication with City Council and sort of on the same page in terms of how we're hoping to move this forward. We've received $12,000 in a Main Street Improvement Program fund from the state of Maryland. It's matching money. 10,000 of that is for promotions, which we intend to use for advertising at the metro station platforms, print media, some brochures, and website kinds of things. And $2,000 in beautification, flowers, planters, that sort of thing. I also wanted to let you know that we have received for the first time an allocation from DC City Council. It's something we've worked very hard on for many years. And for the coming budget year, we've received $30,000, which is a nice match for the increase you gave us for this year. It is earmarked for facade improvement and business loans. It is also matching monies. But I just wanted to let you know that that's a nice step forward for us in the cross-jurisdictional work we're trying to do. Thank you.
All good news. Thanks.
My name is Sabrina Barron. I'm the president of Historic Tacoma. I'd also like to speak about the Montgomery College Facilities Master Plan update that's going to be presented this evening. The Montgomery College is one of our very important community institutions. It's been around for a long time. There's a very symbiotic relationship between the college between the college and the historic residential neighborhoods that surround it. I've seen some of these presentations to date, and I have every confidence that the college has the ability and the wherewithal to make things happen that will be a win-win solution for the community. And I think you're going to hear about one of those possibilities tonight, which is a parcel of land on Burlington Avenue adjacent to the new Arts and Health Center that's been built by the college at the corner of East-West Highway and Georgia Avenue. I also want to talk about your work session item about the Tacoma Metro development. By my count, actually, there have been 8 resolutions passed by Tacoma Park City Council with regard to this issue. And once again, I'm amazed that we're kind of looking for another mandate here. I would have thought that that was fairly abundantly clear by this point in the evolution of this issue. I was also kind of interested to see language encouraging one possibility for this city council to get involved in site plan development to be undertaken by certain D.C. city government departments. I kind of had some questions about that kind of involvement. I see a role for the council in advocating for transit and access to transit. It's a regional transit station. Everybody uses that station, Maryland and D.C. Alike. I certainly see a role there, but I would question the wisdom of site plan involvement in site plan development there. But I hope the council will remember the very strong mandate that you have from Tacoma Park, Maryland residents and taxpayers about the community feeling about the proposals for this site. And I would encourage this council to continue to be strong in the direction that you have been strong to make sure that your constituents and this community, Maryland taxpayers, are served well by what happens on that site in terms of transit access. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, then we'll move along to the city manager's comments.
Just a few brief items this evening. At your places at the dais, I have left a revised copy of the memo that I distributed last week about a new code enforcement initiative. Councilmember Clay accurately pointed out that some of the properties were mistakenly shown in Ward 6 when in actuality they were in her ward. So those were the only changes in that memo. Also at your places this evening is a copy of an email that I received, and the council may have received the same email directly from the Maryland Municipal League. Essentially, it was sharing with the city as well as other municipalities that the State Transportation Secretary John Pecori is anticipating what he termed a substantial downturn in anticipated highway user revenues during fiscal year 09, which is the budget that the council just adopted less than a month ago. Basically, in the email, they cite a number of factors, including just the general economic downturn. So this is something that obviously we will be watching as we go forward in the fiscal year, but at least it's very clear from this memo that what we had anticipated and relied upon in terms of this revenue source in the FY09 budget is probably not going to materialize, and that we will likely see a shortfall. Highway user revenues constitute about 3% of the city's general operating revenue, so it's not a huge component, but I guess we'll have to wait and see exactly what substantial means in terms of actual dollars to the city. Also just wanted to share with the council and with the community some problems that we have been experiencing with our Public Works phone system. This has been on and off for the last week, and apparently there's 2 things that seem to be either happening. You try to call a number at the Public Works facility, and either it rings and it doesn't go to voicemail and you can't reach a staff person. Or alternatively, you just get a very rapid busy signal and once again don't reach anyone. Our IT staff is working with Verizon and with the actual vendor for the software, but if you do experience any problems in trying to reach the Public Works staff, if you could please call the city's main phone line, which is 301-891-7100, and someone actually in the community center will be happy to try to get a message to the staff person, and we do apologize for that inconvenience. The last item I just wanted to mention to the council is we have received notification that the Crossways Farmers Market has received a grant from a nonprofit organization. The council may recall that we had acted as sort of a fiscal agent In FY08 for the farmers market, essentially, they are not set up to take funds. So essentially, we just kind of acted as a repository. We do anticipate that we'll receive a similar request for this grant that they have just received, which would mean we would be bringing forward a budget amendment to the council sometime in the near future. I believe the amount of the grant was about $25,000, so that's good news for them. So that's it, unless there's questions about anything.
I just had a question regarding the new code enforcement initiative. Will that include properties like 36 Philadelphia, and I think there's one in Sycamore also? So ones not necessarily that are in foreclosure, but ones that have been problematic properties for a while, which I commend the sort of systematic approach here. I think adding those properties to the systematic approach would probably be.
Yeah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Wright, but I believe both of those properties have actually been condemned by Montgomery County. Is that correct?
I don't think 36 has been condemned.
Okay.
I think there's been a demolition by neglect
Okay.
citation against it, but I don't think it's actually been condemned
Okay.
yet. Councilmember Robinson may know.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth on this one. Thank you, Josh. And I'd like to see a list or a portion of this list which lists those properties that are severely neglected and this kind of the status and where they are going and could go. I'm not sure about the condemnation on 36 Philadelphia.
Yeah. In answer to, I guess, both of your concerns, we will be approaching this very broad base. There's certainly those properties that we know to be in foreclosure that obviously have some code maintenance issues. There are those who've been condemned, but I think if the properties that you both have cited are not actually condemned, they certainly are abandoned, and both of those would fall into the category that we're concerned about.
And then I would just say perhaps we could send a memo back to Transportation Secretary Picari suggesting that he might find some funds in something called the ICC project that he could use to fund highway user fees as opposed to building that road.
Any other questions? Okay, then we will move to our regular meeting agenda. And the first item is a resolution ratifying a collective bargaining agreement with Local 400 of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, which is the union representing police officers.
That's correct. Yes, before you tonight is a resolution that ratifies the agreement. This agreement represents, covers a contract period from July 1, 2008 through June 30th, 2011. And the contract primarily makes the provisions similar to those represented by the ASME union here with the City of Tacoma Park. It does also address an issue of the pension coverage that the police officers have. The police officers and city management will be looking for a new pension plan over the course of this year that has good benefits for the officers, but costs the city less money. And so that's something that we will be working on, and the contract reflects that work. The resolution before you authorizes the city manager or her designee to sign the agreement. It provides for the funding necessary to implement the agreement, and it approves any provisions of the agreement that might conflict with the city code or city rules and regulations. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about it.
First, let me just thank you for bringing this to conclusion. I know it's your first year in the lead for the city on labor negotiations, and I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Somebody like to introduce it?
Moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Barry. Any check again for questions? Is there any public comment on this resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We'll now move to the next item, which is first reading ordinance adopting the FY09 pay scale for police.
That's right, and this is a two-reading ordinance. This is the first reading ordinance of the pay scale that was part of the union contract.
Somebody like to move the resolution?
Moved.
The ordinance.
Second.
I think that was moved by Councilmember Wright, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Any comments on the ordinance? Any public comments on the ordinance? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving along to regular meeting agenda item number 3, which is a resolution authorizing the FY09 program open space allocation.
I'm still here. On this item, I did prepare some additional revised information related to program open space funds for use for the Piney Branch Pool. But I'll first of all indicate that what we've got before you is a resolution approving the annual program for our use of program open space funds. And this is something we do need to submit to the county and then on to the state. The proposal for the current year allocation, which was $62,444, was to use $50,000 to have the county use $50,000 of that for the Piney Branch Pool, and for the remainder of the funds to be used for the Colby Park tot lot fence repair and replacement program. The information that I have gained is that we may not actually be able to use the program open space funds for the pool work. It's something we're trying to determine. The actual work that the county is planning to do at this point doesn't look like a capital improvement in the definition that's used by program open space, and those funds can only be used for capital improvements. It is possible it could be used for the boiler replacement, but the boiler does not just deal with the pool, it covers a larger area of the school. And we are trying to find out more information about if that $50,000 can be used and how much that work would be. Even if the work qualifies for program open space funds, we do have to have both the county recreation department and the school district to agree to certain legal sign some legal agreements related to the POS program, and we're not sure that they would go along with that. They seem very cooperative, they seem helpful. At this point, they're kind of hesitant because they don't think it fits into the capital program requirement of the POS funds, and they're still waiting to hear if Adventist Community Services will be a partner in the project. So we're a little bit hanging out there. Nevertheless, I recommend that you do approve the resolution, that we submit the annual program, and if we need to, we can make a modification to the annual program.
Is there any reason that we would need to include something else at this point in the resolution to be in the program so that it makes it easier to shift the funds around?
No,
or is
it
it
doesn't
just
make
as
any
simple to
difference.
add something later?
It doesn't. There's not anything we need to do.
Okay. Councilmember Wright.
I just had a clarifying point from your memo, number 1. It says replacement of the boiler might qualify if it is needed for the pool, and if the boiler is used primarily for the pool. My understanding is that that's exactly one of the issues, is that the heating system for the pool is specific to the pool and needs to be redone. And the problem is right now they're running it off the boiler that heats the rest of the school, and that's why part of the reason you get these wide variation in temperatures. So
Right.
I think it would be pretty clear if they replace the boiler, or I think it's part of the pool pack system actually that heats the water up there. We went and looked at it. That if that were being replaced, it truly would be just for the pool. It doesn't heat the rest of the school.
What I have been told by the folks from the county is that they're not planning on replacing any of the pool pack systems. They're only planning on repairing them. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, POS funds probably would not be able to be used for that purpose. We still have to get some more information. I would say that I'm becoming convinced that it's fairly unlikely that it'll meet the capital improvement requirement. But, I'm putting out feelers everywhere. I'm thinking, asking pretty good questions, I think, to try to get a favorable reply. Nevertheless, I want you to be aware that...
Yeah, no, I understand. I was just trying to clarify that
for what
one.
the county is doing. Originally what we were talking about, and not necessarily in this 50,000, but certainly what had been talked about with the community and the council, was the idea of a separate entrance and a variety of other things that are more capital improvements. And I think the county is trying for, a fairly bare bones.
Yeah, no, I was just clarifying that one thing in
Yes.
point 1. And I just want to make sure that I understood your answer to the mayor's question. Since we're going on recess, you don't feel like we should conclude anything else in the resolution in the sense that if we're away for a month and they say no to POSs, are we going to get stuck up where they're not going to do work in order to open close to school because they don't have money from us?
Well, that's a slightly different question. I think that it's a good idea to approve the resolution related to the POS annual program. I think that there may need to be some real discussion about an alternate source of $50,000. And that's not something that I have in front of me as a knowledge of where you might get the $50,000. If you feel like you need to have the $50,000 identified before recess, then I think we all have some work to do to find that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just asking from the perspective of I think we're all still pretty committed to having the pool open, and I would hate to hear that we went away on recess and then we came back and I'm sure we'd hear about it while we were away on recess, but have to be called in for a special session to vote on something just because we needed the emergency funds for the county to move forward to do the repairs in order for the pool to actually open
Right.
on time.
I think that's a good point, and maybe there is something that we can bring back at another council meeting soon that would give some direction as to some fallback steps or something during the period of the recess.
Yeah, my sense is that if the county needs the check cut in August, they're in worse shape than I thought.
What I was going to suggest is that perhaps, I'll talk to the mayor tomorrow, but at one of the 2 meetings remaining before you go on recess, is that I provide you with some options in terms of where the $50,000 could come from. And basically, even if it's just by voice vote, that needs to be formalized at a meeting after the recess. If there's some budget amendment or anything that needs to be undertaken, you could do that in September. But at least I would like to have clear direction from the council in terms of where that funding should be taken from if it becomes necessary.
Councilmember Robinson.
I just wanted to backtrack 1 second. Your understanding is that the pool pack, or the portion that's just for the pool, will be repaired?
Yes, my understanding is that it will be.
That's
the plan by the county officials.
Okay, and that's very important because it alienated through temperature variations a lot of swimmers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilmember Clay.
So the money from the program open space funds, the model is to give that back to the county, it looks like. Do they
We
pass
cannot,
them through us?
we do not have any way of directly using POS funds for the Piney Branch pool. We don't own the property. We don't have a certain kind of a lease agreement. What we've done in the past, and it's perfectly fine, and I've confirmed it again with the state, is that since the money goes through the county we could simply have an agreement, and there's a formal kind of a statement that's done that allows the county to use those funds, that we agree that the county can use our funds.
The county must have more things that qualify for the use of program open space dollars than they currently expend in program open space dollars. Couldn't they use the $50,000 in program open space dollars for another project that they have? I mean, I would think that they would have lots of things that would qualify for that money.
Well, the point on this is that it would be pursuant to an agreement that we would sign between the city and the county for a specific purpose.
But I think Colleen's point is the agreement could say, we're giving you this $50,000 to fix field X somewhere in the county, which you were going to spend $50,000 of non-POS money on, and in turn, the county is going to spend $50,000 on fixing the pool packs and everything else.
I'll look into that. There may be a way to do that. We have interesting bureaucracy problems between Park and Planning Control and the County Rec Department. And so I'll look into that, but it would be an option that we would try for. Can't tell you how it would necessarily work out.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
And I guess I'll ask the final question. Where'd all the POS funds go to? We used to get triple this.
You were on the legislative committee?
I know.
No, it is a big cut. It's actually similar to what we got a number of years ago, the amounts we got a number of years ago. but we've gotten really used to the between $150,000 and $350,000 amounts, and it was a shock to see the $66,000 or whatever it is.
Yes, symptomatic of what's happening with funds that come to other jurisdictions from the state and the federal government.
I'm just curious about that since it's passed through the county. Did the county see their total POS number fall by a similar amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It hurt them too.
I knew the answer to the question. I just wanted to have you say it
No,
again.
that's right.
Okay.
One of the things, just one other remark. If, for example, the POS funds can't be used for the Piney Branch Pool or some other kind of trade-off system, then I'll come back to you with other recommendations for use of program open space funds so we can amend the annual program.
Okay. Any other council questions? Is there any public comment on the resolution authorizing POS funds? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We now move to the consent agenda, which has 4 items. Resolution in support of Maryland Main Street Improvement Program, resolution providing for reappointment to both the Arts and Humanities Commission and the Safe Roadways Commission,
Mayor?
and providing for appointments to the Adventist Hospital Land Use Committee. Councilmember Wright.
Clerk.
Uh-oh. I'll move it.
Gee, we got talking so long, I forgot.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Robinson, seconded by Councilmember Siemens. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Now we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's. Thank you very much. If I have a failing, it's forgetting to call for somebody to move something. Now, back to the consent agenda, and those 4 items. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Oh.
And
Did that get moved?
it's all resolutions.
Did that one get moved?
No?
I'll move it.
Second.
I'm on a roll here.
Yeah, right. So are we.
At least you're consistent, Bruce.
Yeah. I heard a move by Councilmember Robinson. Did I hear a second? Councilmember Wright. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. There aren't any opposed. That was not my no. Now we can move on to presentations where I won't have to call for any people to move anything yet, unless it'll be to move buildings or move positions, or we move down there. So does anybody want to say anything before we set up for the presentation from the college and the council moves down off the dais? It doesn't look like it. Therefore, we'll move down there. Somebody can lower the lights, roll the screen, and we can do the presentation, and then we'll come back up here for questions, comments, et cetera.
Test. Good evening. My name is David Kapp. As it says on the slide, I'm the Associate Vice President for College Facilities. And thank you to the Mayor and Council members for this agenda item this evening. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm also joined in the audience by Dr. Brad Stewart, our Campus Provost, Mr. John McLean, Director of our Capital Planning and Design, and Ms. Sandra Filippi, who is our Campus Master Planner. So we have 4 of us here this evening. I'm going to walk through, there's 15 slides here, and I'll go through and explain each one, and then we can always come back. First off, to build the case of the logic here, I'll review the 2002 to 2012 master plan data, and that's a little difficult to read, but when we looked at 2002 to 2012, we do 10-year master plans as required by Maryland Higher Education Commission, 10-year look-aheads with a 5-year update. So the last master plan we did was 02 to 12, and that is currently what's in effect, and that was presented down to at the council here and the mayor back in February of 03. And currently we're doing an update, which is 2006 to 16, so it's actually a 4-year, but it sometimes takes us a year to get the whole process working, so that's why we went ahead of time there. But our head counts at that period of time we were looking at were 4,820 in 02 of fall, and we projected a growth up to 7,234 the 2 to 12, which was a 50% growth for the campus, 25% overall for the college. Our headcount revision for 6 to 16 shows 5,685 total headcount as of fall 2006, and fall 2016 we're projecting out to 6,708. So a slightly smaller headcount projected in 16 than what we projected in 12. So a slight degrade in the total population headcount projection, which I should mention, the projections come to us from the state of Maryland, Maryland Higher Education Commission, to the college every year after the fall headcount is submitted. Within a month or so, the headcount projections out the next 10 years, so it's a rolling headcount every year out to 10 years, comes to us, and the 2006 to 16 one is as shown there. The 2002 to 2012 master plan, again, facilities master plan, showed with that head count that we needed an additional 126,000 net assignable square feet to meet the needs of that growth. And at that period of time when we did that head count, we projected projects, construction of a new science center, health sciences center, construction of a student service center, construction, renovation of the K-Fritz Arts Center, which was the giant bakery, and construction of a new cultural arts center. When we look at the projections from 2006 to 16, again, the head count was slightly less. We look at an overall projected deficit that we would have to solve of 95,368 net assignable square feet. And in this period of time, already planned and already completed is the K-Fritz Arts Center, so that square footage is in our data. The Cultural Arts Center construction, which is underway, well underway, and then the renovation of the Commons, which has just started. So these square footages are accounted for after these projects, given the head count that we project out to 16, we would be short a 95,368 net assignable square feet. So that's the goal of this master plan, 6 to 16. How do you solve that problem right there? So if you want to identify your problem, that's it. That's what we're trying to solve. The other piece of information that comes into our facilities master plan is a facilities condition assessment. We had one done for the 02 to 12, and then we had a follow-up by the same engineering firm come back in 6 to 16, and we had for every single building an assessment done for the current replacement value of that building and then deferred maintenance. Our Science North building, for one, these are just two examples of two buildings. The replacement value of the Science North building without any program changes, just build it exactly as it is right now, which you would never want to do, is $7 million. The deferred maintenance value is $3,708,000. So it's about a 50% of the value of the building is in need of deferred maintenance. Science South building, the replacement value is $4.2 million with its deferred maintenance of $3.19. So you can see that both buildings are in pretty poor condition and just aged. I was looking at a report today, 1966, had a picture of the Tacoma Park campus, and Science South already existed. So it's a 40-plus-year-old building, 40-plus-year-old teaching facilities inside of those buildings. Every single building on the entire campus has a similar type of assessment done for it. We incorporated that into the master plan so that we would know which buildings needed a greater renovation or demolition and renewal and new construction. I'm going to come back to this slide. I want to go first to the 02 and talk a little bit, but this was the 02 to 12 facilities master plan. and that is what we're currently working under. To orient you to where we are, here's the railroad tracks, and then Fenton Street would come right down along here. Here's our parking garage that everyone, I'm sure, is very familiar with. The new Student Service Center with the bridge that goes across the tracks into Blair Park. Across here is the Cultural Arts Center that's being built, Health Science Center that was built, Cafritz Arts Center, the former Giant Bakery, a new parking garage that we intend to start construction with this fall, which actually will take, this does not exist right there, that wing of the Cafritz, so the parking garage will stretch this way. The 2002 to 2012 Facilities Master Plan understood, it was done by Einhorn Yeffie Prescott through meetings with the community, understood that encroachment into Block 69 or future development into this area was not acceptable, and to keep the development on this side of the tracks, on this side of New York Avenue, and with a more dense development along Fenton Street, a less dense development along, or renovations and development along New York Avenue to respect the scale and nature of the house and of the neighborhood. It's in Block 69. And we talked about Falcon Hall renovation, Commons renovation that is being renovated right now, and eventually the Science North and Science South would be demolished and rebuilt on site to meet that space deficit. Learning Resource Center, which is really currently a number of one or two pavilions right here, and then the Learning Resource Center here, to be piecemeal demolished and rebuilt so that eventually that it was an entire Learning Resource Center there, again, across on this side of New York Avenue. And then the more dense development on this side of Fenton Street. And across the tracks, you see that we have the Cultural Arts Center, Health Science, and the Cafritz Arts Center. So that was the presentation that was made in 2002 to 2012, and this was the response at that period of time, and took these notes directly from the transcripts of that presentation, which in that period of time was Mayor Porter, was very appreciative to the college's discussion with the neighborhood. And again, there, the sensitivity that we felt that we had at that time was to not put that dense development along New York Avenue, but rather to move the denser development along Fenton Street, the new science buildings that we need to build, and have that Learning Resource Center rebuilt in such a way that it respects the neighborhood across the street. And here's some comments. Dr. Porter at that point in time was the provost of the campus, and he participated, just as Dr. Stewart's participating in actually guiding all the programming and academics of the campus and, that we are to satisfy. And you could see that that period of time we thought we'd work very well with the community and with the council and the mayor, so that we were not in a confrontational mode, but actually in a cooperative mode there. And then another comment about the college has brought some good news, and that was, I think at that period of time, we weren't going into Block 69 and building skyscrapers and six-story buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we were. That's 2002 to 2012. And I'm going to back up 2 slides to come back to this one. And this slide I just wanted to put up here to show we attended the presentation by the Montgomery County Neighborhood Advisory Commission when they reported to you. And here are some of the bullets that their design team and their architects talked about respecting in terms of the neighborhood and in the community down here. Create a partnership with us so that we participate in their meetings as much as we're invited and they participate in ours. Step down the heights of the building towards the residential, again, respecting the neighbors across New York Avenue. Site the buildings to front on the street with pedestrian-friendly openings. Enhance transit use. Create the sustainable legacy and seek lead. Well, Cho Ben Holbeck, you see the name here, Cho Ben Holbeck and Associates, they're our master planning team. And here are the goals that they developed and presented to the community and is what is guiding them. Maintaining existing town and gown partnerships, retain a more residential scale on all developments adjacent homes along New York Avenue, 2 stories or a 3rd floor story setback, employ articulation and fenestrations. I had to have Sandra look up those words for me. Fenestrations, there's concern that we would build a building that would have a very monolithic mass to it and be very ugly to look at. Fenestrations would be the types of things we did for the Student Service Center, where we have building facade treatment such that it's a more interesting building, but also having windows, doors, and passageways through those buildings so that we don't build a wall along New York Avenue that the neighbors would have to look at. Encourage transit and employ traffic calming measures. Plan the campus with principles of long-term sustainability and a minimum of a LEED silver for our new construction buildings. So in many of the points brought up by McNack, we believe that we've mirrored those points that we provided to guidance to our design team, and in fact the design team, through interviews and discussions with the community, developed these types of goals themselves. So now I can come to future development. This slide is the existing campus still, but you can look at your packets, it's a little bit clearer, it washes out here. But future development, in order to respect the existing neighborhood, and should the campus continue to grow, we should really look along Fenton Street, some property acquisitions. And in a real dream world, you move along Burlington Avenue across the tracks and acquire a property and develop north of Burlington, and then conceivably on the western side of Georgia Avenue, and all that area to be considered as something the college could continue to look at there. So the future development of the campus conceivably like this, if you needed to continue to grow in that direction and in that route to develop more square footage, still respecting the neighborhood, developing gateway entrances to the campus as you identified as a campus, increase interior circulation and green space on the campus, which we're trying to do with quads. This here's some of the quads here. And there's a quad over here that we've developed along the campus, Cafritz Art Center and Health Science, etc. So that's what we looked at as a long-term future development. Now we're going to look at some options that have been developed. And one of the options is essentially the existing option, the 02 to 12 master plan, and this would be the 6 to 16. But a couple differences I'll highlight. This is our existing parking garage and the future to be built parking garage. We would put a pedestrian link between the two parking garages. The Student Service Center still in existence. The Science North and Science South building to be demolished and in phases rebuilt, so that it is a more square footage science building. Science South and then Science North to reconstruct those, and the Learning Resource Center to be built in phases, demolished and built in phases, as we mentioned. The actual footprint is more like here of that building. There's the Pavilion of Fine Arts, and here is what we call P1 and P2, which are existing pavilions. And one difference is this building here, which is the Communicative Arts Center. Most of the programs of that are moving into the Cultural Arts Center, so we will be back renovating that. The 2002 to 12 plan talked about simply a complete renovation of inside of the building. The current master plan team is recommending to demolish that building and then rebuild on the same footprint, essentially the same footprint, to get more square footage and have a more efficient building. So that's the main difference between this option and what the 02 to 12 master plan predicted for us to do. This option, I'll start with the easy ones first. It's still on this side of the campus, still with the linkage of the pedestrian bridge to this parking garage and our existing parking garage. The Communicative Arts Center would still be demolished and rebuilt for a business program. Student Service Center building has existed, but the changes are here. We realize that it will be a challenge for us to solve if we demolish Science South and Science North, rebuilding them on exactly the same footprint and then coming over to Learning Resource Center. So this option calls for the first thing you do is demolish the two pavilions that are here and build your Science Center in this direction so that you can move the existing science programs into this Science Center, and then demolish and rebuild your Math Center here and then your Learning Resource Center here. Let me make sure I didn't get that backwards. Nope, I did. Learning Resource Center here, then Math Science here. So the existing Learning Resource Center would move to here, and then you would build your Math Science there. The advantage of this approach here is it allows us with a better phasing so that you could build your science building first, and then demolish the science building, build the Learning Resource Center, and then build the Math Pavilion there. So you could phase it much easier than our previous option showed. And then a final option, and there was one mistake we'll point out here. There was not a bridge shown here, but we would still do the pedestrian bridge. This existing side of the campus we've talked about. Communicative Arts Center would still be demolished and rebuilt. The pavilions still exist. And on this particular one, we talk about the Science Center being built here with a Math Center being built here, but acquisition of the storage building, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it's the storage center that's to the south of closest to the campus, acquisition of that, and that becomes your learning resource center with an expansion of our parking garage right there. And it allows you to have a learning resource center that is a linkage between the two sides of the tracks of the campuses. So main difference of this one is learning resource center here instead of either there on the previous option or over here on the first option we talked about. Science building still being built and then a math center being built here. Again, New York Avenue being along here in Fenton Street. So we would attempt to still maintain the respect for Block 69 that we can intend to do. We just took a, yes, sir. Oh, good, very good put. I'm sorry. The question was a slight expansion of Falcon Hall. It's a little tough to see, but let me just answer one way by talking about the Commons. The Commons building is right here, and the renovation is going on right now. Anywhere we could acquire or build into our program to get a few square footage additional, because you see we're trying to make up 95,000 square feet. Well, when we're doing this renovation of Commons, we're actually going to enclose a little area right there. On the interior quad, it's going to be an enclosed entrance. That's going to give us like 1,000 square feet extra. Well, Falcon Hall, the same idea. Should we get around to renovating Falcon Hall, we could gain some square footage by enclosing an area on the interior quad side of Falcon Hall and gain ourselves 1,000, 1,500 square feet or so, like that. And that does show on these master plans to do that type of enlargement of the building in terms of interior towards the quad. Yes. Does that answer? Okay. Took some photos of the current views. This would be looking from the east side of New York Avenue towards our current Learning Resource Center, which is west and across to the west and across New York Avenue. Realizing that this time of the year you've got shrubs and you got greenery, and it doesn't look like that in the fall, and I don't think I would slip one by you. The wintertime, also much more scarce foliage there. But the idea would be that this type of view is something right now, there's actually a building there. It doesn't show very well in these pictures. And this one, we just took a shot straight up, essentially in the air, to try to see what the top of the Learning Resource Center is right there. Again, I think that the concern of trying to construct the building there, which I fully understand and appreciate, we believe we can do that in a manner that still respects that neighborhood and still provides a view that is pleasing, because we would certainly do an awful lot of landscaping work on our side of the street to ensure that we provide some type of screening material for that building. These are the projects that are foreseen for the Tacoma Park campus here, and that list is much more easily read in your documentation there, but it's a lengthy list of projects. A new parking garage on the west garage, which I talked about, renovation of the Commons building, new science and math center, a physical plant, folks moving into the basement of the Student Service Center, the Student Resource Center and Library, and then renovations of Falcon Hall. I didn't talk about the Child Care Center during any of these presentations, but in all of our options, we're looking at the Child Care Center relocating from the existing house onto the campus, and to be determined what would happen with that existing house, which is in the historic district, which is a bit troublesome every time we try to fix it. So we're as interested in getting out of that house, I think, as the community is for us to get out of that house, and then we need to solve where to put the Child Care Center. One option for the Child Care Center we've looked at, and one of the options is to be incorporated into Falcon Hall, which is our wellness or gym there, and that might work out well there. And I just want to show you two slides rather quickly that are the list of the projects. Not that you're overly interested in this, but this is the Rockville projects that we have listed for them. And what we have in their master plan for the next 10 years, a new science center, which we will start construction on this winter, a new student service center, library resource center being rebuilt, an art building addition, a physical plant building being built, a math center, and a list of about 4, 5, 6 other renovations, plus not listed there is a parking garage. And in our Germantown campus, we're going to start building a bioscience education center, hopefully next year, a new child care center, and an expansion of the observation drive. And then we have a new student service center to be built up there, a physics, engineering, math building to be built up there, a phys ed complex to be renovated and expanded, a physical plant building to be built, and then a number of renovations. The point, I guess 2 points I'd want to make to you there is the college is not trying to push growth to Tacoma Park. Tacoma Park is growing just like the other 2 campuses are. And additionally, each campus has quite an extensive list of projects that we would like to either build new construction or renovations in the future. I know the list looks long for Tacoma Park. It is longer for Rockville and longer for Germantown. So it's an extensive list of renovations and new construction that we have looking at for 10 years. And then I know we should have a discussion about the Montgomery College Foundation, and I'll come back a few slides and tell you why this is important. But the folks have asked, what is the Montgomery College Foundation? It's a 501c3 nonprofit charitable organization governed by business, alumni, and community leaders who are not college employees and not responding necessarily to the president or to our board of trustees. And their task is to enhance the work of the college to a level of excellence comparable to the finest college universities across the country through advocacy, influence, et cetera, fundraising. And that's the Montgomery College Foundation. And the reason I should mention that, and I'm going to come back to the slide here, maybe one that shows, let's see which one shows it the best. This one, because I think all the colors are nice and dark. Same plot of land on all 4 slides is this. In front of what used to be the Giant Bakery, now called the K-Fritz Arts Center, there is a surface parking lot right here. I'm outlining with the red dot, which is right next to our Cultural Arts Center. Right now, it's the lay-down area for the construction of the Cultural Arts Center. When we're all done with our work there in Belby Garage, that will become a surface parking lot. Lots of questions from the community, rightfully so, of why we don't want to build and expand and move the science centers over to the K-Fritz Arts Center's front parking lot. That piece of property is owned by the foundation board, the college foundation, not owned by the college. The reason for that is when we acquired the Giant Bakery for a price of $6 million, the foundation put up $2 million for that acquisition, and in return for that acquisition, this outline is all the property that was purchased by the college, the county, and the foundation. And the foundation's $2 million was partitioned to be this plot of land here, to be owned by the foundation and to be reserved for future expansion of the college and future possible revenue generations by whatever is placed on there. But it would be a joint public-private partnership is what the foundation is currently interested in, to put something there that conceivably could be a public-private partnership. So the college would have academic functions there, but additionally there might be something that could be put there that could generate revenue for the college and a revenue stream. Additionally, that is the last piece of land that the college owns for future growth. Everything I showed you on the other slides, which is a little hard to see, but I said if in the dream world, if we could expand, own this storage building, along Burlington, and then on the west side of Georgia, that's a great future development opportunity. However, none of that is a sure thing. What is a sure thing that the college owns is that piece of property right there. And that is a desire to keep that for future growth of the college once we've built out the 95,000 square feet we need to build here, and expansion there for the future of the campus. So that gives us a site to reserve for that use there. I'll have to apologize. It's a little hard to see. I understand there's a lot of information here, but fortunately you all have a handout and you could study and we can go through that. I could stop there and go back to any slide you want. And again, we have folks in the audience who can help me answer questions too. That's my story, and I'm okay.
And hopefully sometime in the not-too-distant future, we'll do a little renovating in this room and then not have to go through the back and forth, moving down there and dropping the screen. We're renovating in the existing footprint. I guess if I can start with where you ended with the question about the, where you were saying basically reserve the location on Burlington for future expansion beyond what's being envisioned with this 95,000 square feet. If you can just talk a little bit more about the thinking of kind of why it's future and not now.
Okay. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to sit at the table? Because there might be a fair number of questions. You'll be standing for a while, so it might be nice to come sit at the table.
Sure. And if you want to have any of your help come up to the table now,
Okay.
then it may be easier.
Come on, John. Sam, you want to? Yeah.
And I ask that just because that's a different twist than I had heard before. What I thought I heard before was that, no, that wasn't available for any college expansion. It was set aside for something else.
Well, yes, sir. It is owned by the foundation board. Obviously, we're very closely tied to the foundation board, and they would do, I would believe, what is best interest of the college in the future, and currently. But to use that space now, when we have the ability to build on our existing campus, would negate the opportunity to possibly have that site that ideally could generate revenue. And that is really what it would like to be done for in the future. But you don't want it to be just solely a retail or revenue generation. The college would hope to get some benefit out of it too. For instance, many years ago, one of the discussions was, is there a way to have some type of combining of some type of residence in there that can generate revenue, maybe first and second floor retail, then residence, and then the upper 2 or 3 floors could be academic offices, or mainly academic offices. That'd be the best combination because we didn't think it'd work with classrooms there. So that could be a partnership where the college would gain benefit for offices use in the future, and maybe then pull them off the existing campus and back renovate what we moved the offices from for more space, and yet still have portions of that new construction generating revenue for the college and also for the community. So I think it's a good question, and I hope I answered that well enough. But it is for future growth, but also future growth as partnered with the foundation to generate revenue. And what we looked at before economic times changed dramatically was the potential, could residences work there, could first and second floor retail there, and could, because we could build up to 9 stories on that site. And if you save the top 3 floors for academic offices and stuff, it would benefit the college, but still have a great benefit to the foundation, generating revenue and trying to partnership with some community activities there too.
All right.
Let me just ask if Dr. Stewart wants to clarify anything on that one too, because
I think the key point of this whole thing is that the property doesn't belong to the college, and the Maryland Higher Education Commission places some rather strict constraints on us about what we can submit to them in our facilities master plan update. The biggest constraint, well, first of all, the big constraint is that they say thou shalt have this many students. And then second, the biggest constraint is that we cannot submit a plan that they will accept that does not solve our space deficit based on property that we own, that we already own. So we have to submit a plan by February of 2009 to them that solves that 95,000 square foot space deficit on property that we already own. Now, we can put things in the plan saying that we would like to buy storage facilities, but that has to be a contingency. We could also put things in the plan that says we could build on that fourth building site on the west campus, but that has to be a contingency because it's not ours, and the board of directors of the foundation may or may not decide that building on it in the near future is what they believe to be their fiduciary responsibility and the best use of the property. So we have to come up with a solution that involves what we already have. And so that's why you see all of the tinkering in the central campus in options number 5 and number 6. We don't have a choice. If we don't submit a facilities master plan that MHEC, the Maryland Higher Education Association, the Higher Education Commission will approve, then all of the projects that you saw at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus, all of the projects you saw at the Rockville campus and the Germantown campus are at risk. They will not give us permission to go further because they won't accept our plan. Then we can't apply for state money, and if the state money doesn't come, then the county doesn't match it, and we're basically we don't have the ability to solve any of our space problems. So there are lots of things we would like to do, but we can't, I guess is the best way to put it, because of MHEC restrictions. So we have to solve our space deficits problem inside a property that we have clear ownership of.
I guess if I can just make 3 fairly quick points that are my reaction to that. I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on TV, but it seems to me that the relationship between the foundation and the college is close enough that some of the details on who owns what and who can count what can be accommodated. It seems to me that what you're trying to do with the various options you look at, all of them we're getting at different iterations of, gee, it makes more sense to build something and then be able to move into it and stage and phase rather than having to deal with coming up with space for existing program and huge disruption. And so it seems like using that piece of property as a way to further phase things makes the most sense in the long run, and just for the ease of doing it and probably cost as well. And the third thing that just struck me tonight was that in many ways this whole question kind of reminds me of the process and the interaction between Washington Adventist Hospital and the city in terms of them looking at their long-range plan, finally looking out long enough and realizing that at some point in the very near future, even if they did expansion on their existing site today, they had no more room. And they could put money into it now, and then the next time they're stuck. And as a result of that process, they want to move. We don't want the college to move, but I think you identified some very good options for what will have to be addressed in the future in terms of expansion to property that the college doesn't own. And it seems like now is the time to start thinking that way and laying out those steps. If I can first go to Councilmember Wright and then Councilmember Clay.
Sure. I'm sure I'll have other questions, but I want to focus on the foundation for a little while. It's similar, I'm not a lawyer, but it does seem to me that the foundation's purpose is to support the college and the college's efforts. And I was sort of curious about this. Do you know of any of the officers of the college sit on the board of the foundation, either as voting or non-voting members?
They're prohibited by the charter of the college and the charter of the foundation, and I believe state law from doing that. So
I think the president
the chairman of the board of trustees of Montgomery College is an ex officio member of the foundation board.
So he
I'm not
can't
sure
vote,
that she
but
has
he
a vote, but
can't vote, but sits on the board.
sits on the board. Now, I guess we can sort of clarify what's going on with this discussion. It would be up to Dave and the facilities folks to approach the president and the trustees to ask the foundation what they think they want to do with that piece of property. So we can sit here tonight and speculate, but it probably won't do us any good.
But it sounded like you said there could be lots of things we would want to do with that property. So it sounded like you actually might be in favor of, if the foundation would let you do that, building an academic, a building that's focused on academics and college purposes as opposed to apartments or retail for people.
Yeah, I'm convinced that MHEC's enrollment projections are wrong, and that we'll have many more headcount students coming to us than they project. And the main reason I believe that is that the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus sits in the one part of the county where the 18 to 22-year-old population is going to continue to grow and grow very quickly because of neighborhoods like Long Branch, et cetera, where that population demographic is going like this. And if the groups that live in the Long Branch area, for example, decide to go to college in greater numbers, you'll get an exponential effect that's going on there too in terms of enrollment. So I think that we might be looking at solving a lot bigger space problem than the one that's on the slide. And you could add to that, Montgomery College is not particularly aggressive in terms of going out and persuading people to come to us. For example, there are 2 recruiters on my entire campus in terms of admissions. And if we wanted to run a full-scale admissions operation, we could probably bring in 500-600 more students every year than the ones who find out about us by word of mouth and what you see on the bus. And once in a while you hear a radio ad about endless possibilities. But we don't recruit aggressively. And so if that changes, or if MHEC gives us another big number to hit, it's going to be kind of interesting.
And I think we would all hope that those kids would go to college, and Montgomery College is a great school, and likely that they would go there. So I completely am concerned, as you are, with that increased enrollment. And it seems like that would be something that the facilities people would want to go and talk to the foundation about. And given that, as you said, you need to submit the plan by February, we should probably get started on that quite soon, and we'd be happy to help in any way to do that. It seems, I understand the foundation put money in to acquire the property, but the public money was also put into that, and are not that piece, but in that.
Actually, the college, there was $2 million from the college, $2 million from the foundation, $2 million from the county, which the college paid back. So in a sense, it's the college, $4 million, and the foundation. But in the end, the college money is public money too. So
right.
But no, the county's money was all paid back. That was the agreement that was had between the previous president
and I would imagine the money that the foundation got was 501c.
It was donated money.
Yeah, donated money, and I would imagine those people also probably were thinking that they were giving their money to a college so that buildings could be built for students to reside in and teaching to happen, not necessarily buildings for either high-rise apartments or retail. And so, and I would go back and really want to question and follow up with something that Bruce said, which is about the costs. So it seems like it might be more cost-effective to build that building, you get a fresh building, you get to move everybody in there, and then you can come back and renovate the other buildings. Maybe not on the level and scale you want to initially, but still get additional square footage out of it and not have to do this very, as you've mapped out, sort of a puzzle dance to do phase 1, do phase 2, and move things around. You get to build an entirely new building, and I think it's pretty safe to say that we would be, okay with you building that building up to or pretty close to the height limits of that Burlington Avenue slot. So, and I think that would be the thing that would be, for the best for the public good and would help the college in the most significant way. So I think we need to go. we're happy to help lobby and talk to the foundation people. So,
Well, the Board of Trustees for the college is a public meeting that's advertised, and it has public forum opportunity to speak. I can't speak for the foundation board. I've not been in front of, I don't know if it's a closed meeting or not, but our Board of Trustees is an open public meeting that could certainly, people can speak at will at that and write in letters. I guess I'd like to go back to one thing too. If I was sitting in front, as I do with the Board of Trustees, very much like this, or the president, and they said to me, those science buildings need to be torn down. There's no doubt about it. You saw the deferred maintenance and values of them. They're not good buildings. So renovation is just not a good use of money. So they need to be torn down. Could I, as a facilities professional, tear those buildings down and rebuild them on site effectively and get it done with no impact visually on the neighborhood from that side of Fenton Street? Yes. So if my Board of Trustees asked me that, and the president of the institution asked me that, who Dr. Johnson would first grill me before he presented to the board, my honest answer would have to be, yes, I can do this. I can do that. We can build those two buildings there, 4 stories, with removing enough dirt to bring it down to grade so that you would probably not be able to see it from east of New York Avenue and not know that they were there. Probably, because 4 stories, I think, but I'm not sure. You can't see 3 stories and a half right now. I could do that. So if I know that we could do that with our teams, and I think I could do it as well cooperating with the neighbors as we did with the Student Service Center and others, we would not bring architects in here that are not able to work with folks. We can meet the demands and the requirements on that existing campus while still maintaining a site for future growth. I would have to answer that I could do that. And I don't know that building the science building over there and then coming back and building something over where the existing science buildings is using the land of the college most efficiently. And I'll stop there because John's more of a programming expert and he could talk about that.
Yeah. The only observation I was going to make is that the 95,000 square foot deficit is a net deficit. So it's spread across a whole range of programs at the college. We still look at, because the enrollment changes, we still look at the art program. The art program now exists in the K-Fritz Art Center. We look at health sciences. The health science program is in the health science building there on Georgia Avenue. And we have deficits in the chemistry and biology and physics programs, which are housed in the Science North and Science South. So they're only a share of that total deficit that will exist currently projected out to 2016. And as we look at the size of the building in the current updated master plan, it's a slightly smaller footprint we're anticipating in our current thinking than the footprint of the building that was in the 2002 to 12 master plan. Again, enrollments change. As we get closer, that'll be either up or down. We'll know what that is. But it's a net difference for those buildings, and even if it's up slightly, it's not a greatly different size building than the current Science South and Science North buildings. The real issue, in addition to Dave's point about the deferred maintenance issues and the poor condition of the existing structures, is the programs aren't adequately supported in those buildings. You have buildings that were designed for educational programs that are almost 40 years old, and teaching of science in facilities that are 40 years old. The academic world has changed significantly, and there's much more interactive relationship between faculty and students in teaching, and that's particularly strong, or is very strong in the sciences as well as any of the other academic programs. The inefficiency of the buildings in terms of their layout. One of the curiosities of the existing campus is that you have buildings that dump spaces directly to the outside. I imagine a lot of you have been on the Tacoma campus and have seen this, and where doors from labs or classrooms literally open to the outside world in covered corridor spaces or things like that, but they have no climate control. They benefit from all of the cold breezes in the winter, and hot winds in the summer. And so, addressing the issues of this design deficiency is one of the critical issues in going back and rebuilding and reconstructing the campus. And it affects not only the science buildings, but the other buildings. So I think what we're trying to do is address a number of issues of how buildings function and finding the right way and how to put programs into those buildings and make them function in the best manner possible, and update the buildings so that the academic instruction will also best support the kinds of teaching that is current for a campus and a college in this new age.
And I don't think any of us up here would argue against that. We're totally for that as well. I think it just, in our minds, you can solve that. It's how you're going to solve the problem, and you can solve that problem also by building those updated Burlington.
We've looked at the site on that fourth site, and as you look at the size of the buildings, 95,000 square foot deficit spread over the programs that exist on the campus. In the scheme of things, it sounds large, and it is a size of a building, but you can see incrementally you bump out a Falcon Hall, you grow the width and dimensions of a new science building, you fill, if folks have been up in the communication arts building at the corner of Philadelphia Avenue in Chicago, that building has a hollow core. It's a donut around a core, and all of the scheming that we've looked at, and one of the reasons in the plans that they've reviewed show a new development there, a new building there to fill in that core, is to gather those spaces and fill out that 95,000 square foot deficit. But we've got to figure out a way to back renovate or back construct on the college campus in the best way, most efficient way, the kinds of buildings that need to be there. Our intent is to find the best programmatic relationships between the existing programs that want to be co-located and be located together, and not push them in directions that geographically spread things out in ways that don't mix and match in the best and optimum solution. We looked at a certain density in the 02-12 master plan of students and programs, and essentially the 06 and 16 plan reflects that density. As we indicated, we've built some new buildings. The deficit is actually 95,000 square feet that we're trying to address, and the density of development on the existing campus, the original campus, is roughly the same as it was in the 02 and 012 master plan. And so we're trying to come up with a solution and a relationship of programs that maintain the academic relationships and the development of the property in ways that make sense to how the campus needs to grow.
Councilmember Clay?
I have noted your request, though, and Dr. Stewart can go through his chain of command on the academic side of the house, and I can go on mine on the administrative side of the house and make sure that our bosses understand the request from, I know it's not formal, but you understand your request, and we'll make sure that folks are aware of that. Again, just to be an honest broker, I think that our president, Dr. Stewart's boss and my boss would realize that we could solve our issues with a construction of a building that, frankly, in the 2002 to 2012 master plan was very acceptable to most of the folks that are sitting in your seats, with the dense development on Fenton Street and the less dense development on New York Avenue, and we still reserve that site. That's what why it was one of the options to continue to look at. But again, I wrote all your notes. I wrote about this desire, and we'll go back and talk about that and making sure that the community's heard and you are heard. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Clay.
Thank you for coming and spending another Monday evening with us. It's like to see your smiling
It's the high point of my month.
Good. Well, see, we got to get you to quit doing such a good job on the campus and attracting all these additional students that we have at the
Okay.
When I was in college, I was actually on the foundation board of directors for my college, and the role of our board. And I don't know if we had public meetings or not because nobody ever came except the board member.
Right.
But, you know, our role was to raise money for scholarships and to do, to help with programmatic enhancements, usually in the arts or the sign language program, that kind of thing. And not really to engage in economic development, although we did run a flea market every Sunday in the college parking lot that was very successful.
You have a suggestion?
My college just recently voted down a proposal to put a Costco on the parking lot where the flea market was, and still will be now. And the reason that they did that is because they felt like they didn't want to give up space that was right there, that was available for the development of student-oriented activities to a business enterprise. And so I've only been on the council for a little more than 2 years, and I try to keep up with what's happening with this. But it strikes me that you have this land that is adjacent to your college and really, in a sense, kind of within the street framework, at least, of what your college campus is. And we spend so much time talking about these little parcels, like the little house that's the child care center and the intrusion of this place. Couldn't we possibly get the storage facility? That it seems a little crazy to me to take a space that is connected to your existing campus and you're so desperate for space and use it for commercial development. I don't personally oppose the idea of the foundation engaging in commercial development. I'm sure they're attracted to it because it provides a sustainable source of income for those scholarships that make it possible for everybody to go. So I'm totally cool with that. But I have to say that it just doesn't really make sense to me that you've got this piece of land and it is such a premium. And the truth is, you could do a retail center or housing, even housing for the students or faculty. It could be more disconnected from the campus, and what you want in your campus area is this campus program that you talk about where people are able to walk from class to class, hopefully within 10 minutes so they're not late to class, which is much more important than where they stay or maybe where they shop. So when you go to the foundation to talk to them about this, that's really, to me, is the critical point about this particular little piece of land. The other thing is that I saw a plan to use that foundation site for a college building. Did the college develop that plan where it shows the little foundation site and you've got one of these college buildings or uses on it that is now programmed someplace else? Did I imagine that? Because now when I look at the ones that you've given me, it's blank on all of them. At some point, wasn't that...
There was one of the earlier options. I think you saw on Dave's presentation, I think the Tacoma ones are numbered 4 and 5, and so there were 3 earlier options, and one of them did include looking at that, and there were some conversations with some of the foundation folks in the past, wasn't directly linked to that, but that their desire to see a denser, more revenue stream development there, and so we were responding to that and pulling that out. It also looked, I believe, in that one scheme at the purchase of the second storage building that's at the corner of Philadelphia and Fenton up at the traffic light, and so it was, even leapfrogging and those auto service properties that exist up there too, and so it was also sensed that that was another large leap in terms of jumping over the closer storage facility. But the critical issue on the foundation site was in the proposed buildings that we're looking at, whether it's a science building or whether it's a resource building, are probably in the 3 to 4 story nature. And under the funding requirements from the state, where they participate in half the funding for projects, they're not in the habit, they won't endorse funding a spec building or a spec space. And so the desirability on the part of the foundation is that we maximize the development of that site. And as noted, it could be as much as I think it's 120-foot zoning, so it could be an 8 or a 9-story building on that site, so that a 4-story structure on our part, without any of the other possibilities coming forward, and we have tried to look at, we solicited developers for the redevelopment of the bakery site a number of years ago when we did the renovation project there for the Arts Center, and had no takers at that time, and the market is in a worse situation now, unfortunately. And so we've looked at what could happen and ended up pulling back on that particular proposal.
And when we did look at that piece of property before for the 8 stories and the first 2 to 4 stories being retail or housing to generate revenue, and the top 4 stories being academic space, we did talk about the fact that we would build that such that, should the campus continue to grow, the bottom floor stores that were generating the revenue could be converted back to campus use there, because at some point in time, if the campus continues to grow, you'd have to do that. So, I think we're at the point where we think that building space gives us maximum flexibility, and I understand the concern that you're voicing, which is a very logical argument to build that first, but this kind of seems to be where we're at.
I think the other place you may have seen that, Colleen, is that unless my memory is really failing me, because I looked at what you have online for the approved 02 to 12 plan. In the map I looked at, it's not here, but it actually cites this space, and it has an arrow to it, and I think it's actually shaded green in the map that I looked at. It says it says future academic building in it, so that might be
that's
right.
the one.
Yeah. So that's, Dave, not to split hairs here, but we approved we were in approval of the entire plan. And so to come back and say, well, you approved these buildings before, you're okay with that, we also approved the idea that a future academic building could go there. So, and now we're in the future. So the idea that that would actually be used as a site where a future academic building would be located is sort of where that comes from, and I think is consistent with.
And we're not disagreeing. It is a future site for a future academic building. It's also, if we can generate the public-private partnership to generate revenue in part of that site, we would like to do that. And then, should the college continue to grow, we need to back renovate that and take it over completely for the academic side. We would do that.
So I guess my last comment would be that if I manage to get reelected again, that I'm afraid I'll be sitting here again and we'll be having this conversation, and you'll have all these great new buildings with all of the state-of-the-art science in it, and people will be coming here in droves, and you won't be able to fit all of your projected enrollments in the acceptable building envelope space for the space that you have. And what I hear is that it's really difficult to acquire new land, and my fear is, of course, that the least expensive land is the housing land, and you continue to essentially hold the right to do that at a state level. I was thinking that maybe since the housing market is supposed to bottom out in September of 2008, that would be a good time to come in and take some of the overdevelopment of condos in the Silver Spring area, but it might actually become cheaper than the single-family house. But seriously, where are you going to go in the long run if there isn't a serious dialogue and mechanism at the state to get real about acquiring land for the college?
Actually, we're going to go in that direction. Our neighbors managed to convince us that we needed to include in our next capital improvement plan budget a line item for land acquisition. And we are currently exploring what, and I really don't want to see this on television, what one of the possible buildings that doesn't belong to us along Fenton Street, was that vague enough, Dave? Might cost on the open market, because we don't want to give anybody who might be watching the idea that they can hold us hostage in terms of getting that. So we're actually going to explore that process. We've agreed to do that and things like this. And from a campus perspective, one of those pieces of property is key to marrying the two halves of the campuses.
Well,
And
I
so-
went to this thing that Montgomery County put on for recalcitrant city council people, because Mark Elrich couldn't go, so I took his spot. And it was really interesting because, that's true. It was very interesting because one of the things that they talked about was that the 15-year life on the land use pattern for big box retail. And that at the end of the 15 years, you know, it has to be developed for reuse. And one of the things that they said is that you see these smart developers who come in and they develop the big box retail and they hold on to it for 7 or 8 years, at which point you see some unsuspecting person who thinks they're going to make a minute of money on it, and they're actually buying in on the downhill end. So you should time your acquisition plans for that 15-year land use pattern.
Thanks. One other brief point that you all should know. I pulled the list of the foundation board members in order to test a hypothesis, and it is indeed populated, not a majority, but populated by folks who are or fancy themselves to be developers. So you need to keep that in mind. That's all I'm going to say about that.
We had socialites on our board.
And the thing that strikes me in this conversation about what may have changed up here in the intervening years is the sense that, at least the way I saw it before, there was pressure to do things within the existing campus footprint, within the existing owned properties, and trying to make things not look as big as they are, particularly from the single-family home side, and recognizing that in looking at the projections for enrollment, at your sense of what those numbers might really be, and looking out into the future beyond just here's what we've got to do for February '09, that the only way to really go is acquisition. And those self-styled or real developers on the foundation board could have a field day going in that crescent coming around that you identified in the lightly shaded boxes, in doing that expansion. And the thing that strikes me is that I feel like, in a way, what we're trying to say is, we hear that you want to, that you need to come up with that space in the existing property that you own, and the pressure for you is to build that as big as you can while making it look a little bit smaller from our point of view.
A lot smaller.
and kind of where we are is, well, but don't put all that pressure in there, and then you still have to burst out onto the other side and do that expansion, and we're left with these things that are bigger when in a few years you deal with that expansion and you deal with that acquisition, and you can put a whole bunch of stuff over there, and we go, boy, I wish we had gotten to that just a little bit earlier so that we didn't have this real pressure in the existing property, and these things over here by us that we wish weren't here, gee, they all could have gone over there. And I recognize that there's that tension between what you have to do and what we're trying to do. Councilmember Robinson.
My daughter graduated from Boston University this past year, and Boston University is on a street called Commonwealth Avenue, and Commonwealth Avenue is quite a long stretch, and Boston University owns quite a number of buildings along Commonwealth Avenue, and I must say it looks kind of disjointed. There are some big buildings that Boston U has, and some small ones, and some townhouses, and they're building lots there. And when I appreciate also the shaded area showing the future development, and I don't have anything specific that I'm going to add to the residential side, but I hope that you and the various boards look closely at Georgia Avenue and the crescent that you've drawn there, and think broadly and into the future and creatively as you can. And maybe there is an opportunity to swap the use of one place for the use in another place. And I'm glad to hear that the acquisition fund is rolling, so that's all I have to add now.
Yeah, maybe we can get rid of the adult bookstore and
Hey, that's
a
right.
couple of empty storefronts.
There are a couple of places along Georgia which could stand a little upgrade. You're so right.
Councilmember Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. I do appreciate you using my words to help support your case earlier. Politicians always love to see their name in print. But one thing, in a positive way. One thing that you didn't mention in the quote, which I believe I did mention that evening several years ago, was we have the sense that a campus is a cluster that is proximate to the programs that exist there. However, speaking of Boston College, Harvard University recently announced plans to expand beyond the Charles River away from its historical campus area. And what I did mention a few years ago, and I'll just mention it again now, since the discussion is sort of going off into the future development and possibilities and options for development, and that would be there really is nothing between your campus now and the University of Maryland College Park, way down University Avenue. And even though on the way down there is the other part of Tacoma Park, it's other opposite here. And it would seem to me that the demographics there, Langley Park and that part of Tacoma Park, very young people, large immigrant population, always changing, always churning, difficult to know what it's going to be like in 12 or 13 years, but I think what we will know is it will continue to be densely populated. It will have a lot of young people, probably more than they are now. And so what I would like to suggest is that as you look at the long-term planning, you look at having a presence in that area where there is none now, but a very noteworthy and needy constituency that might find it difficult to commute to the main campus. And you'll have the Purple Line there eventually, and you will have a transit center. And there's a lot of property now, and I know for a fact that a lot of it is on the market now. It was part of a very large purchase made by a large drug chain that owns that entire area now, and we know, because Bruce and I met with them a couple of months ago, that they're very eager to unload a good portion of that property, and it is served well by mass transportation, and the need is great for all kinds of technical and vocational. English as a second language, but also as a sort of technological corridor that extends up to the College Park and beyond. This east-west corridor is, I think, going to be increasingly important in the future, and why not consider that as a satellite or a mini micro campus with the possibility of having, and maybe in joint partnership with the university, doing some interesting, what do they call? Oh, business incubators would be, another possibility that we have discussed. But also, some hard sciences in that area too, and it might help relieve some of the tensions between the neighborhood here and your development plans, because you don't have a similar kind of neighborhood situation there. You have a lot of what is now retail and commercial property extending both into Prince George's County, but certainly on the Montgomery side where you would have to reside. But there's all up and down the New Hampshire corridor and partly also the University Avenue. There is considerable amount of property there, and it's something that I would encourage you to take a look at. And if you need some assistance in touring there and meeting some people as your future plans take shape, I'd be more than happy to help you out there.
Councilmember Siemens.
Hi. Thank you all for coming tonight and giving us another update on college plans. I don't have a lot of advice or good suggestions here as some of the other council members had. I don't have any good examples from other cities, but I just like to tell you where where you'll find my support for your plans, and that is in the neighborhoods. And we have many of the people here tonight from your neighborhood. I think it's important, and I think anyone can look at the maps of the different plans you have and see that you have one block that's really a problem for the neighborhood. And so the more that you can do in your plans to diminish your presence in that block and to be a good neighbor to the residential community around you, the more you're going to get support from me, and I'm sure the rest of this council. And I really think that's the driving force. I mean, we want you as the community. We see the great value that you have for our community, but we also have a lot of residents of the community that are neighbors of yours, and the better neighbor you are to the community, the more support you get on the council, and it's definitely the more support you get from me. Thank you.
Councilmember Snipper.
I have a very tiny comment. On the cover of the first slide and several of the other slides, you have the logo of Tacoma Park. I don't believe that we approved the PowerPoint. So I would urge you to remove the seal, because it gives the impression that we somehow approved this.
Okay, sure. We thought you were going to sue us for copyright infringement.
I thought he was going to say you had the old seal, but no, you have the new one. Councilmember Wright.
I just had some more specific follow-up questions about the details of the plan, so I can, if there was another point you wanted to make, I'm happy to defer those.
All I was going to do was, you go ahead and do that, and then I was going to make sure and check in with the MCNAC and with North Tacoma Citizens Association and see if the chair or president or whatever of those two bodies felt that there was anything that we missed up here that we needed to touch on. So if you want to do your points, and then those two folks can weigh in with anything that we've missed badly.
Thanks. So I just wanted to go back a little bit to the details. And the maps and buildings are different scales, so it's sort of hard to tell. But something I heard you say was that the buildings would be basically the same size as proposed in 2002, 2012. And they just seem, particularly both buildings seem fatter. The Fenton Street one, and maybe these maps are not meant to be detailed, goes from being quite set back from Fenton Avenue to basically resting right up on it. There's a lot less, at least in how they're drawn. They're much chunkier. There are less indentations or pass-throughs in the building. And in particular, the New York Avenue building is the one we're very concerned about. I think previously it's talked about really as a two-story building, and now there's this sort of two setback with three, like the Student Services building. And I appreciate that setback on the Student Services building, but you can see it. It does create, it doesn't block as much light, but it does create a visual, something visually you can see. It's not invisible from the street or when I'm talking to Jim on his front porch. So those things those details cause great concern for me and also for the residents. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, are they really the same, or was there, and we also, I tried to look and compare kind of total square footages, but you're much more specific in this plan about the square footages on those buildings, and not quite as specific in the 2002, but it seemed like the actual square footages you were going to get out of those buildings were significantly increased versus what was suggested in 2002, 2012.
I'll jump in first and then let other folks. The programs that we looked at in the science building in particular, and then the resource center are essentially the same programs as in the 02 to 12. The makeup of the buildings is essentially the same between the earlier plan and this plan. Because of the slight reduction in enrollment, and primarily for that reason, the square footage in this plan is reduced. And in addition, we've built buildings. And so between those two issues of a construction program that has completed a number of buildings and the slight reduction in enrollment, we do have a smaller deficit to address. And so the buildings are slightly smaller, even if the shape and all there might be misleading. The other issue is that both plans are conceptual in nature, and so the details of what we're driving at is more in the descriptive discussion of the plan. And we've tried to allude to breaks in the facade treatment and the details of that and breaking it up. And in particular, I don't think we did a very good job on the third option you saw this evening. In that one, we sort of left behind a very square rectangular box on New York Avenue rather than even the hints of breaking up the facade treatments and pushing it back away from the street as well. And that reflects just an earlier round in a more rough round of the process that we've been going through, because we're still very much in the middle of the process of looking at these options and exploring it. The issue on New York Avenue that came up both in the 02 and 12 plan as well as this time around, there's actually a fairly significant elevation change, you're probably aware, from the Student Service Center building at the corner of New York Avenue and Fenton, the new building, and Commons now at New York and Tacoma. There's roughly about a story, maybe a story and a quarter difference, so 10 to 12 feet or more in grade change. And one of the solutions that we're looking at, and in particular we will be looking at in more detail, is to take advantage of that grade change for any construction there on New York Avenue, whatever the proposal is, both to emphasize and relate better to the campus core, the quad side of the campus, the inner block of Block 70, which is the main campus there on the east side, and relate better to that. But it also allows opportunities to be 3-story on the quad side, on the inside of the block, and 2 stories on the outside, depending on how you deal with the grading of the site and how you deal with that elevation change. So there's a number of design details that as we push into the next phase and as we actually work a project that we would develop more and more. And I think it also alludes to comments that Dave made about the science building on Fenton Street. The existing Science North in particular sits way up high on a small knoll. In order to drive at some of the space needs that we have for the program and minimize the impact of that structure would be to excavate that knoll, bring the structure down to the grade of Fenton Street on that side for the science building. So I think we've got some opportunities just in the topography of the site to work this. Frankly, we've not gotten to that level of detail in the master plan. So that, we pointed in our discussions with the architectural team at some of the issues that they need to develop and think through in a little more detail, but we've not worked it to that level yet.
And the big disconnect that keeps coming up is that this is a master plan for meeting the enrollment projections and space deficits as determined through the Maryland Higher Education's enrollment projections they provide to us. It's really not to set design standards and guidelines. It's not to actually site the buildings precisely. And we are stuck now and gotten ourselves into a box where we are trying to work with the neighbors, because the first time we did this 02 to 12, the Learning Resource Center literally was just a box sitting on the map. Not to scale, not to anything. It was just to represent that building would be X square footage in the future, and that was it. And all kinds of conversation developed about, well, it's a box. Why isn't there passageways through there, and why isn't this, and why isn't all that? That really happens at the project level. That's not the purpose of this master plan at all. It would be wrong to do that. So all the details, that's why I'm very careful not to promise that something's going to be exactly on the same footprint it is now. We don't know that until we hire a true engineering team to come in, an architect, that we give them a program to, and they do the site analysis, and they really start siting the buildings. And we are, when we go through projects to build a new building, as we did for Student Service Center, Health Science Center, so we go through the mandatory referral process with Park and Planning. You get to that extreme level of detail, but not at this phase. But we've tried to get a little bit of that in here to try to help some people with their concerns with that exactly. But every time I do that, it seems like it just gets more and more problematic. Well, this building is not exactly the size of that building, which is not what you showed earlier. None of that is supposed to be truly representative of what it's going to be. The only thing that's true representative is this is how many square feet we need to meet the needs of the science program or the arts program or whatever program. That's a fact. That's something that's documented evidence in there. But whether the building is going to be 3 stories or 4 stories or be this wide or that wide, we don't know. We don't know. But we know generally the floor plate of something that's going to be there.
In your option 8, you added additional parking. If we got the thing we all want, which is to acquire some of those the additional properties, I was just curious about that because I assume this is sort of driven by enrollment projections and need, and so we don't account for additional parking anywhere else in any of the other options. So
actually, we are in the process of building a new garage. We're basically 100% design documents. We've completed the application for county building permit, just went in last week, so we're well at the tail end of the design process, and hopefully it'll be out to bid within the next 60 days for the garage. That garage will add about 360 spaces to the campus, and while it's a tough and tight parking environment, we'll respond to the needs of the campus over the 10-year time frame. This campus has a high rate of mass transit usage, the best of all 3 of the college campuses, and we anticipate that situation will continue. So we didn't anticipate in the other 2 schemes on the need for new parking. If and when the 4th site that we've been talking about, the foundation site, develops, there'd clearly be a need to look at parking as part of any development, whether it's a college development or whether it's a commercial development of some nature. But the parking that's in that option 8 is really it's what to do with the leftover part of the parcel. In order to put the Student Resource Center on that site, you buy that parcel, you put a 3 or 4 story structure there for the Resource Center, but there's still space left over. And so it was sort of responding to filling out the box, if you will. Clearly parking is a tight issue. It's a concern on the campus. It's a concern in the neighborhood. Could we use it? It could be used. Is it a requirement to be met under the other options? No, it's not.
Councilmember Ike, that appeared that is something conjured up by the architect. It did not appear in any of the college's internal charrettes and things like this. All we did was give them a number that we have 6.96 registered vehicles for every single spot on the campus. A parking spot that we have. And then when that option came through, they conjured up additional parking there. We have no desire to turn that into a transit center or whatever. In fact, we're much more interested in a purple line stop 2 or 3 blocks north of the campus on Fenton Street than we are in parking thing.
We are
Would
too.
it be nice to have parking so we can have more events? You bet. But that's not something that came from our facilities folks or from my folks internally. It's something, as John pointed out, the architect dreamed up.
And then lastly, I know I've asked a lot of questions. The last thing is more just we've asked a lot of questions and been critical. There are things about this that we like, or at least I like, and I've heard neighbors like also, including the suggestion of vacating the current child care facility on the corner there in Block 69. There's also in one of these options the idea of potentially vacating Pavilion 3, I think it is, which is Pavilion 3, which is the that older pavilion, which you're thinking about renovating, I think mainly for office space, that was in one of the options, if not tonight, that I saw earlier. So we very much like those ideas. We're very appreciative of your listening and sensitivity about Block 69, and also appreciative of, if you are going to do the black box theater building, redo it in some way, and we understand it's an odd building, but you're really committed to adhering to a footprint that is as the footprint is there, and building an appropriate building there. So don't get us wrong, we like a lot of these things, and I think we really all want the same thing, which is to grow the college in a way that benefits the community and the kids, and is beneficial to the larger society. I think we might just differ a little bit on some of those details, and we really, when you go for funding, we want to be there, not arguing with you, but really supporting you and trying to help you get what you need to grow the campus. So I hope that we can talk to the foundation and adjust things in a way that we'll all be a little happier with. So thanks for all your time and all my questions.
And then we can just hear if there's anything. Yes, if you'll let me finish one sentence. If we can hear from representative from the neighborhood or McNack about anything that we may have missed that we really need to get on the table now.
Is this on?
I think so.
Yes.
Can you really hear me?
You want to say?
Okay.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. This is Lorraine Pearsall. I live at 7708 Tacoma Avenue. And this presentation just makes me really sad because, first of all, we thought you were going to see the same presentation that we did, which you really didn't. And there were a lot of issues raised in that with respect to the future that raises our concerns, it emphasizes our concerns with scale and massing and provision for the future. And for example, there is a slide called Heights, which shows that the college's concept of 3 to 4 scale building is not just the Science North building, but also encompasses the Falcon Hall. And that's coming onto Tacoma Avenue. Now, I'm not saying you're seeing it now, but the problem here is that we're stuck in these 5-year iterations. And without proper planning to have release valves for our community, what's going to happen, the next 5-year iteration, you'll see Tacoma Avenue building up, you'll see everything building up. I want to remind you that the reason why the Health Science Center was built on Georgia Avenue was because it was so big. And it was put there, 4 stories of it, huge, massive, on Georgia Avenue because that's a really wide road. And I don't think that the college is going to be able to put a building of that size on Fenton Street. And it really looks, when you look at the scale, it certainly looks, the volume that they're showing, it certainly seems like we are now attaining the massiveness that we have always really been worried about and spoken against. And I'm hearing John say that it's not as big a building, but when you look at the volume, you certainly don't get that impression. I want to say to you that, we're past 2004, and we've lived through the construction of the Student Services Building, and that was something that our neighborhood did agree with because we wanted to keep the college here. And we have always been worried about how the college would expand and renovate the existing campus. And the proof of that worry is in option 8, because option 8 is the one that actually takes density off of these buildings we're talking about now and sticks them over on the public storage building, although we were told that isn't really an option because they don't own the building. So we're in a catch-22 here. the community has been saying, lighten up the load. And the option 8 shows that to some extent. However, option 8 is not real. And the thing to me that is the saddest thing of all is the removal of the Burlington Avenue property from the chessboard. And that is, and the college obviously has to worry about density. They have to worry about growth, and so do we. We're a National Register district, and we're very concerned about how we are affected by growth. So the removal of Burlington Avenue was very detrimental to our future as a future release valve. It is forcing the college to continually come back and put more density here. And every 5-year iteration, we're seeing the same. And so I am very sad about this because I like these people up here. I've worked with them a long time. Option 8 is indicative of that. But really the answer is, for the short term, for now, is Burlington Avenue. It is clear that we don't want to go through 4 years of staging, and the expense of doing that is going to be over $70 million. The college has that property, and it's certainly very fuzzy in our minds right now as to who owns what. We've heard different stories even here tonight. But that building could be effectively put into play, and it could be built tall and save the taxpayers a lot of money in times of a tight budget situation. There is no doubt in my mind that the college is going to need a lot of help to keep growing. They are going to need the county, they need the state, and they have a very aggressive foundation that goes out and earns a lot of money for them. They can certainly find money to build off campus as well. But our needs are such that we need to find a way to offload some of the density, as the college is doing in option 8. We really do. We can't have a health sciences building right here, even on Fenton Street. Fenton Street is a very tiny road, and we have been realizing this. Fenton Street is small. It's an important connector to the District of Columbia and to Silver Spring. We are concerned about putting all this mass on that space, and just the staging and the blocking of the roads and calming that will happen will start to plug up the traffic and drive it onto Philadelphia Avenue. It's all a problem of how do you fit an elephant in here. And it's very difficult. We have small streets. As I said, we're a National Register district. We are asking Maryland Historical Trust to help us because we need their input here in terms of how this is designed and massed. Because we're starting, after seeing the Student Services Building, which we're very happy we worked with the college on it, but it's the one big building that we wanted to see in our community. We didn't want everything to get quite so large. We're still now, there was a point in time when we weren't talking about a 4-story building on Fenton, and now we're talking about certainly a 4-story building on Fenton. And so I'm very much concerned about the future. I'm concerned about how do we unload some of this density from our current National Register district, and how do we get it back on Burlington that it was that was always told to us. I feel a little bit like Sitting Bull right now, because in many respects we were told that the Burlington Avenue property was our safety valve. Tonight we are hearing, this is what makes me the saddest, that this is going to be a public-private partnership, and this is not going to be an academic building. This is no longer our release valve, and somehow the college doesn't own it anymore. But when they told us this, they owned it enough to be able to make that commitment. What I'm saying to you is, I certainly respect the college. I respect its mission. I respect its people. I know those 4 guys sitting up there very well. But we're trapped in a process that keeps getting bigger with every iteration, And without a serious release valve, you will find that what we get is going to be a lot bigger. And David, I don't think you really can make it so small that it's not going to matter. In fact, your own architects said that they were worried about how tall it was going to be and how it would shade your own quad. And so I think that it's time to really start taking that into account. And I was also sad that you went and took pictures from Jim's porch. I don't know if you asked him that you could or not, but you went there, and my goodness, P3, let's talk about that for a minute. Pavilion 3, we have been talking for years about removing that building from our community. That building separates our historic district. It separates Jim and the next house from the rest of the community. That is something that we actually have explored, and we have talked about it. And the college even mentions it in their write-up, which I don't know if it was shown tonight, may perhaps, but it does say here, other alternatives include vacating P3. We didn't talk at all about that tonight, but P3 never should have been built. It is overwhelming. It towers over our homes, and it separates our community. And it would be a wonderful gesture if the college took it down and donated that land as open space. And this is not a new idea. We have talked about it. Brad, you and I have talked about it with David, talked about it with Joe White. We've been talking about this for about a decade now. And you know, it really is time to plan for taking P3 down. That would bring back something good in those horrible memories of the past that we don't really like to go back to, because we so do appreciate the relationship, the good relationship we have at the college. But it would be a great gesture. We didn't even talk about that tonight. So there is, you know, the Burlington Avenue removal is one of the most serious things, I think, the breaches that was done in this master plan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any comments on P3?
There's probably a lot of things I didn't say, because there's slides and notes and for all that, but it's in the writing, and P3 was an option to be demolished. I will recommend not doing that. You can see that we want you, but we don't want you. We want you off of Block 69. We want you off of the Fenton Street. We want you across the street. So it's a dual, it's just, I've been through this for 8 years and before that, and it's just slowly pushed the college away, but we love you, we love you, we love you. So, yeah, P3's in there to be torn down. That's a lot of square footage. How much is that?
About 20,000.
20,000 square footage. We're already short 95,000. Where are we going to get that 20,000 square feet? So,
okay.
It's in there. Yeah, and you see kind of the issue here of everybody's involved in a number of options here. There's a lot. These are options. Right. And we had many options, and we had a process to go through with the community with even more options, and narrowed it down to 3. Get comment. We'll narrow it down to 1. So there could be confusion as to what option is what, but that's why we provide written reports too.
Okay.
One quick comment too. We did, and I know it'd be a difficult situation, but we did ask permission to take the photos, and Mrs. Evans provided an opportunity for us to meet there and have a conversation.
Right.
Not that,
Sandra actually went.
Not that maybe was the best thing to do, but in any case, it wasn't. We just showed up.
Sure, thanks. Francis, anything else we missed?
I'll be very quick, and I'm going to make a point that I think is perhaps exceptional and maybe unique in Tacoma Park history. You found substantial agreement on the recommendations coming out of the North Tacoma Citizens Association. You had 14 citizens. There was a write-up of a report. Everyone endorsed that report. I communicated that report to the McNack Committee. I have heard back from almost all the members of McNack, even one who's on temporary assignment in Vienna, Austria, endorsing the citizens' report. And so there were some concerns raised by some, but that's normal. But what we were hearing among the citizens and among the study group that you asked to look at it
was essential and profound agreement on their basic recommendations. Secondly, the second point I'd like to make, and I'm not sure we could get it clarified tonight, but perhaps we could ask the college to come back to the council with it. It was mentioned that that numbers for the space deficit that is needed to be met is the most crucial point. And what they provided was 95,386 net assignable square feet. I would like to ask everybody to start talking in terms of gross square feet. The consultants at the last presentation were talking like that. As we know, the ballpark way of handling net assignable square feet is you double it. We're talking about a deficit of plus or minus 200,000 square feet. All right, the second point in terms of square footage is I can't tell what numbers add up to what. When I look at the cover sheet, which led off on their initial presentation to the Citizens Association, if you total all the possible additions to the new Science and Math Center, it says phase construction of 13,300 gross square feet. Alternatives include the addition of Associated Learning Center of 8,900 square feet, a health science addition of 15,000 square feet, and or a physical plant addition of 18,500 square feet. I read that as that is a possible total construction of new 155,700 square feet. Now that's 50% bigger than the Student Services Center. Even if it's only 113,000 square feet, that's the same size as the Student Services Center. And I think Lorraine made a very eloquent presentation that that was already a very large structure and no more of that scale should follow. I took a look at the rest. I'm just not sure what numbers, and maybe a request from the council to the colleges. I know you're trying to keep some flexibility in your planning. I know you're trying to anticipate your needs, but could you please give us a totaling of what each one of these structures, the top possible, with all your additions in there, would be for each one of these structures and where they're located. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anything for a final point about question about square feet and net assignable?
Well, they do work in net assignable square feet. That's how the architects work, because that's what your program fits in, and that's net assignable. Doubling it to gross up would mean you're building a 50% efficiency building, what are we required by the state? No less than 62% required by the state. So our efficiencies have to be at least 62%. So it would not be doubled, and we do work in net assignable square feet all the time. You don't get the gross to net ratio until you have a design team on board really looking at the exact building there. And just one example, 18,000 square feet for the physical plant that was mentioned, that actually is proposed to go into the basement of the existing Student Service Center. So it's not new construction, it's not a new building, basement of the Student Service Center. Half of the basement's empty right now. When we build it, we left it for a future expansion. So that's an example of where that could go. So the 95,000 net square feet is the net difference between existing campus and what the future expansion would be. 95,000 net assignable square feet.
Okay. Jim, I thought we were going to get you before and we got in the rain. You got any final point?
I apologize. I've got a family emergency, and I thought that phone call was for that. So I apologize for not being here when whoever came up. I just wanted to say I'd like the comments that we submitted entered into the record, if you would.
Sure.
With some detail. And I'm sorry that I was going to indicate that, yeah, we did give them permission to take pictures off from our porch. Over any time we take pictures of it.
Okay. Good. Thanks. Thank you all very much. And we'll take a short break, and we'll come back at. We're not going to do public comment all night. It's not a public hearing. We heard from the neighborhood association. We heard from our committee. It's 10 of 10. We got to move on. So we'll take a break, and we'll come back at 5 of 10.
Metro development. On November 8th, 2007, the WMATA board voted to approve the sale and development of the Tacoma Metro site. At that time, the point of decision-making regarding the development moved to the Federal Transit Administration and the District of Columbia government. About at the same time, this council had a new council come on board, slightly new, and there was some discussion that you wanted to consider changing your position or not changing your position, but discussing what your position might be going forward related to the Tacoma Metro site. There's been a good amount of community input. There's certainly been tons of documentation and materials provided to you over the years and recently. And one of the things that was desired to do at this time was to talk out a little bit about the issues related to the Tacoma Metro and I think try to determine what your route would be going forward from this time. The council has a position on the Tacoma Metro site, which is that preservation of transit access is essential at the site. We've worked hard on that for many years. From this point, related to especially the district of government review process of a site plan and the planned unit development, you have several options. You can take no position on it. In the past, with certain development projects, the council's actually passed a resolution taking no position on a particular development. Or you may continue your position talking about transit issues only, transit access issues only. Or you might take a position that comments on some other aspects, and a number of members of the community have talked about the importance of green building and stormwater controls and trees and design. A number of other people have talked about integration with the commercial district, the appearance vis-a-vis the residential areas, that kind of thing. My understanding is that the developer, EYA, is preparing its filing for the District of Columbia Development Review process. They may be working also on revising their plans somewhat for the submission by WMATA to the Federal Transit Administration for approval. We don't know what those revisions might look like, but my guess is that it would be relatively soon that some of that information will come out, and certainly the City Attorney's Office has been following closely the discussions with the WMATA submission to the Federal Transit Administration, and that does look like it would happen relatively soon. Is that correct? As best we know.
We've been hearing that for 6 months.
Exactly. It's clear as mud. I spoke to the Office of General Counsel, contacts that I've been dealing with just again today to just make sure. And lots of staff meetings going on, no submission yet to FTA, although earlier we had been told it would be by the end of June. What she said today is maybe another few weeks, but she can't even say that with any certainty. So there really is no additional time frame on that yet.
And the just remind us again that the timing on those two is independent of each other, or where do they tie back into each other? Because I remember discussions about which one they would do first, whether the district process would go forward or whether the
I think
FTA.
they're independent of each other. I mean, there may be choices that they may wish to make that it makes more sense for one than the other. Certainly, we've been very interested in trying to encourage a more revised plan for us to review to make sure that it meets transit accessibility standards, which is an issue for the Federal Transit Administration. But I don't believe there's a requirement one way or the other.
There's no requirement. They said they were going to do FTA first. Obviously, that's taking a lot longer than they originally thought. In our submission to FTA, which we did when we weren't sure we would see WMATA's before in time, we actually asked very specifically that it would be better to do FTA later so that FTA would have the advantage of some of the detail that it could then evaluate in deciding on whether to grant the approval. But their plan has always been, according to their statements, is that they were going to do FTA first.
And my recollection is that once we got past November of last year, the sense was that they were probably going to file with the FTA within 60 days, and then the district laid out a time frame for the work that they would need to do to get their process going, and that was more along the time frame of the district process coming to some kind of more public point somewhere around the period from now, maybe into the early fall.
Well, I think it's much longer than that. It takes a long time to do those development review processes, and I'm trying to.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about the kind of their own internal process to get to the point where they would start the more public process, taking them to about no earlier than now, whereas the FTA process had been seen as much shorter and coming first.
I think you can potentially do it within about 6 months, but the more likely thing is more like 18 months. I mean, the real process of preparing plans and reviewing them and the back and forth to make a complete application and a variety of things normally takes a lot longer than the kind of minimum time requirements that you might see on a flow chart. So, it's not a quick process. Certainly, there's plenty of notice time before different public hearing dates, and there's several public hearing dates that are built into the time frame, into the process for the reviews. But I think in terms of, there's several different stages when you're doing a development review application that are often important to be involved in. One of the earliest is at the very early submission stage, when you're first going into the office and you say, here's my package, and they start reviewing it, and they say, well, you don't have this, and well, you'll need a traffic study that does this, it needs to be updated, or whatever. And so early on in that process, there's lots of give and take before you can get an application. That's something that my guess is that the city of Tacoma Park, even if we were very actively involved and welcomed by the DC Office of Planning, probably wouldn't be heavily involved at that stage. That's a very internal staff stage. But soon after that, when you start getting in a package, that's when a lot of give and take takes place from other entities, that kind of stakeholders in the process. And then once it starts to get to the point where there's an application submitted and a date for a public hearing is established, then you have a real formal review period, and that's the point where we would be coming back, if we were involved in a site plan review process and you wanted us to be involved as staff in that process, we would be bringing back to you what that site plan has, what things meet the criteria of the review process for plan unit developments for the DC government, what standards we think are appropriate, what goals that you might have established are met or not met, and that kind of thing, that you would then come back with a resolution on that you would present at the public hearing. So that's a fairly formal time period, and there's a lot of work that's done at that stage. Because there's a couple different public hearings, there'll be modifications and there'll be different aspects that are emphasized in the different public hearings. But again, we would likely, if you wanted us to be involved in that development review process, we'd be coming back to you with those details, and then you would take decisions. And concurrent with all that, you can do lobbying, and you can do other kinds of kind of promotional stuff. And there's lots of discussions with other parties that may feel the same way about a particular issue. But those are fairly standard processes that we would come back to you on. And that's what we've done for other projects that are outside of the City of Tacoma Park's borders that we felt were important.
If I could just get back to the mayor's point about 60 days to go to FTA, your memory is correct. That actually was in the contract between WMATA and EYA that WMATA was required to go to FTA within 60 days. As you can see, that's not happened, so my assumption is there have been a lot of mutual continuances and extensions of the contract that have been granted. We're way beyond the 60 days.
Do you have any idea what the issues are that's caused them to delay? That you can speculate
I
about
don't.
now?
I don't. Actually, I tried to tease some out today and got a kind of canned answer.
So that we're still kind of where we were 8 months ago, that there's a certain short time frame in which we expect WMATA to file with Federal Transit Administration, and there's this longer process that's the district's process for the development review that could still take many months before it gets to the point where if we were to be involved, we would be involved.
That's true. The other option, those are for the formal process.
Right.
The other option, which has been suggested by some, is that there be discussions directly with the developer to try to encourage a certain kind of design or change or whatever to the plans. And so that's outside that process, and that could happen as soon as if both parties were interested in that, then it could take place at any time.
Okay.
Just a reminder to the council, if you remember, the resolution itself from the WMATA board required EYA to work with the Montgomery plan, the transportation access issues, which was really the Nelson-Niagara plan.
And I guess I would like to speculate a little bit that perhaps some of the delay in having the FTA application go forward may be that they're trying to address some of the issues we raised. And I would hope that that would be the case.
That's why we're right.
I'm pretty certain they have been doing that. They have been working on plans and trying to address some of the issues that Tacoma Park and the county raised. And I think this is what I thought we were asking staff to do 2 months ago, was to go and try and have conversations with the developer and I think we all agree to this, not negotiate anything, just gather information and see what was on the table. And I still think it would behoove us to do that, because with that information then we have a greater ability to strategize about how we want to go forward.
Staff has asked for that.
So I would urge us to ask again,
And by saying staff has asked for that, you mean you've asked, but that's been the extent of the comeback?
Yes. I've also talked with the DC Office of Planning and had some discussions with them. And at the time that I spoke most recently, they had not seen any revised plans yet. Their last time that they saw plans was in January, but they were trying to schedule a meeting for later this month where they were hoping to see some revisions.
And what did EYA say?
I haven't gotten a response for my request to meet.
When did we ask UA?
Most recently, last week.
Well, I would say we should ask again if you don't get a response. I think we could potentially use some of the county people to force a response, not force a response, but encourage a response, should I say. And I'm still opposed to the last thing I saw, and I'm still very concerned about transit issues mainly. And based on previous comments, I'm very concerned, but what have they actually done to address any of those concerns that we have had and that the county has stated? And I want to know about those things sooner rather than later, so we're not at the last minute sort of forced into a box to have a response.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Robinson.
I've had some feedback from constituents saying we ought to just back out of the process in the metro and not spend any more energy on it. And I acknowledge that. I've been interested in planning for many years, and I've been a proponent of us taking an activist role in planning and evaluating things. And I've had a lot of experience in the business association in Old Tacoma and in Tacoma, D.C. And I think that the metro is crucial to our part of town where we're in the Old Tacoma portion of town. So I am a proponent of us being involved in the WMATA discussions, and in your educating us on the council and on us working with citizens to. I feel like this is a chance that we have to do that, and it won't come back, and that there are many kind of ramifications that can come from this discussion, and that it does use staff time, and it does use our city attorney's time, and it uses our time and our energy, but I think it's worth it. So that's my part of the discussion on the process and responsibilities, or at least an introduction to that discussion, which is one of the things you're asking for in this memo, that we pursue it, that we work with the citizens to the extent that we get involved with a site plan or other more specifics. We wait, as you outlined here, until an opportunity arises. That we don't jump in and overdo, but that we make strategic recommendations, and that we stick with the transit as the core of what we're after, because we've laid that out as a very important, or central to what we believe, but also the Nelson-Nygaard plan is important, and the plans developed by others in the city are important too.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a comment. I would wish for two miraculous occurrences, and one that is more practical. I think the first miraculous occurrence would be that WMATA's development dynamics change as a result of the identification of a secure, sustained source of funding for the metro. And this would come, ideally, in part from the $1.5 billion that has been proposed to come from the federal government. Certainly that would be a start.
Have to talk to the Virginia Assembly.
The Virginia Assembly needs to be persuaded on that matter, but at least the conversation has started, and there's a proposal on the table. The second miraculous occurrence would be to somehow organize the private purchase of this land from WMATA for the $2 million that EYA is paying for it. And of course, this would be within the limits of home rule practices, but it's certainly something that I think a lot of people would probably contribute to around the region in order to maintain that area in its more or less pristine condition. Since these are on the miraculous side, then it seems to me the practical approach that has been laid out here by staff, points 1 through 5, are definitely worth continuing to work, because these seem to have a reasonable chance of making a difference. And I'd certainly support, maybe with some minor tweaking, the 5 recommendations that the staff has laid out. It seems like we're pursuing many of these now. They've enlarged a little bit to look more at the at the design of the complex as such, but again, keeping transit access to the fore.
If I can just add that when I was looking at the kind of the first three options as laid out on the cover sheet, it struck me that when talking about focusing on the transit access issues only or commenting on the transit access issues and site plan issues, that we've always talked about access to transit, but as we did, it led us over into some of the site plan issues because in working on the access to transit issue, you necessarily get into those other things because it gets into trade-offs and how and what's possible and what isn't. So that I can see us continuing to work the access to transit issue, and it of necessity gets into those other questions, but I think we always have to ask ourselves if we get too far afield from the access to transit issues. I'm not sure that we want to get off into totally separate issues and kind of argue them as totally separate issues. As long as they tie back into the access to transit, I think we can get into those areas, and that's kind of the broader approach, but to maintain the focus on the access to transit. Councilmember Wright, you had some other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to very pragmatically, I agree a lot with what Bruce said on that last point, but I just wanted to very pragmatically look at those 1 through 7 and 1 through 5 and understand, and again, trying to reiterate what I would like, and part of that is because I want to be very clear with staff, and I don't want there to be any misperception about, I hope, what council's asking staff to do. I don't want you guys to be in a situation where there's a gray area about that, and then you all get blamed for something. So when it says sort of work to encourage a site development that fits in well with the surrounding uses, both visually and functionally, to me, work suggests that we're going to actually sit down with the developer and the Office of Planning or whoever else is willing to have a conversation and actually discuss the compromises and what could be done on specific plans. And I'm just not comfortable with that. I don't want to micromanage, but I don't want to give away that authority at this point to staff before I even sort of know what's on the table and what our larger strategic options are related to public relations or legal issues or any of that sort of stuff.
Well, I think that's an important point, and I'd like to address it. Yes, what that would mean, as it's listed right here, is to discuss, gee, this massing of buildings should be more similar to the massing of single-family homes on the other side of the street. I mean, that's what this would imply, a discussion where you might say something, where I might say something like that, or someone might say something like that. Now, what I have listed here, especially the staff recommendation on site plan issues, that's my recommendation as to how I would, as a planner, recommend going forward. However, it doesn't have to start now. One of the things that, and I think your point is that you're not ready to go to these different kinds of interactive discussions on general planning issues until you've seen what the revised site plan is that's being submitted. You have some sense of what are the issues and what your concerns are, and there's more discussion about that, and that's fine. If that's how, I'm looking to you for direction. Now, I wouldn't say a word about it. The direction that's been given to me is, at best I can talk about, is things related to transit access only. I've been very scrupulous about that in my discussions with any officials and any developer. But one of the things that starts to happen, especially if things would start to pop, if all of a sudden in 2 weeks. UIA's got their plan, and they're discussing it with the Office of Planning, and the person gives me a call and says, gee, would you like to sit in on this discussion? And you are on recess. At this point, all I'm going to talk about are transit issues. I'm not going to discuss, gee, I wish you'd handle the stormwater better, or that kind of thing. So unless you would give some different kind of direction, you know, you may say, well, we may deal with this in September or October after we see some of that stuff, after we've seen what is presented, and then that comes back to you in September, and you talk about it, and that's fine. But it's helpful for me to know from the council, you know, how you want to deal with that kind of timing, and, you know, when you get to that point, what you want to say other than transit access issues.
And my concern there is if we get into these other issues, it may be perceived as negotiating or suggestion. They might perceive that as, oh, this is something that's okay with Tacoma Park. And I think we haven't agreed yet that we're at a point of compromise. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's what planners do all the time. We meet with developers with ideas all the time, and we say, here's some general planning principles, here's rules that need to be followed. We do not know what the position of the elected body will be yet, so we can't speak to that. We can only say these are the issues that you're likely to hear raised. That's the kind of conversation that any planner has at any time, because you do all that groundwork first before it comes to the planning board or the city council or whomever for, you know, for some real feedback, and you have the public hearings and that kind of thing. It's fine for me not to touch it, but I'm just letting you know that it is a standard. It's one of the standard kind of difficult roles of a planner, and there's a certain amount that you can get punched on. So I understand that.
Councilmember Snipper and then Councilmember Clay.
To make a really bad analogy, a couple thinking about where one member of the couple wants to get a divorce and the other one doesn't, you don't really get into the nitty-gritty of separation agreements until you've done the big question. So I think as a strategy, I just think it's better to be firm that the transit issues are first and foremost, because as I think as a strategy, you then push the other side farther than they otherwise would go. If you start talking about, well, what about this little detail and that little detail, then you're not concentrating, you're not pulling them towards your fix the transit, fix the transit, fix the transit. I just think as a political strategy, it's better to really be a Johnny One Note here on this one, at least until we're a little farther along.
I would agree. That was a really bad analogy.
Isn't it bad?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
I'm sorry.
And I want to say something about planners and the role of the planner, myself being a planner. I agree that planners do that all the time, and they have to balance those sort of they're the non-political entity in the room giving advice. But I think the situation is different because a lot of times when planners are doing that, they're acting in a role where ultimately the body that they're representing is the decision-making body when they're working with developers. And in this instance, we're not the decision-making body, which makes the risk of any perception that's given in the negotiation that much greater, because then they come back on you and they say, well, you know, you said this or you said that. And I think it changes it a little bit. And the other thing I think is that fundamentally the transit is what I'm most interested in. Of course, I think it's stupid to put 2-car garages next to the transit center, but think the underlying fact is that you cannot resolve the transit issues and still build what they've proposed to build on the land. It's just impossible. So why even go to talking about the site specifics if you haven't resolved the transit issue? I mean, it's the thing that underpins it all. So you don't have to go there. All you have to do is hammer on the transit issues, because they can't fix the transit issues and still build two-car town car garages, or their whole layout. So those are my notes.
And what's interesting is that in the 8 months since there was last formal action on this, in many ways the economics of transit have changed, with people less likely to drive cars and more likely to use mass transit because of energy costs. And it makes it even more imperative to maintain access to transit into the future. And from the other side, you could say it's more imperative to build housing closer to transit. So the stakes in this, just in this lull in time, have been raised. Other comments?
And I just want to be clear that, at least for me, and I think other people would agree with this, we do want you to aggressively engage and try and gather information, because I would think it would be very helpful for us to understand what is on the table. So I don't want you to leave feeling disempowered. The thing that will be really most helpful to us, and I know I'm willing to during recess if need be, and I know Bruce is probably, depending on schedule, if there's a meeting where there's other politicians there that we need to attend, just because we're on recess, we'll still do it. But to aggressively gather that information, so then we can sort of go to the next level of strategy of, are we going to focus on transit still, which I tend to agree a great deal with Ruben and Colleen. I think if you try and solve the transit issues, the pieces of the puzzle, is really difficult to make them work out. And what they're going to want to do is try and engage you in helping them solve their problem. And it's not really our problem to solve, it's their problem to solve. So I don't know if you feel like you have clear direction. If you don't.
Well, I mean, I've certainly heard your point of view. I don't know that it's a majority of the council. I haven't heard anything different, so it may be. One of the things that I will do as best I can is try to get that information. I do feel a little hindered in how I will be talking with them, just as I have been, in really working simply on the transit access issues. So sometimes there's other kinds of things that people ask me about, and one of the things that I've been asked about by citizens in Tacoma Park are some of the stormwater issues and the impact that they will have on their neighborhoods. That's not something that I feel I can ask about. So I'm just being clear that that's not really a transit access issue. So the impact that how stormwater might be addressed at this point is not something I will ask about.
But there's a difference between asking a question about how they're going to address something and suggesting that we have a position on something about how it should be addressed. So that goes to, I guess, the aggressively gathering information. That it seems completely appropriate to gather more information about how they're going to address all different aspects of the plan without saying that we're okay with any of it, or we have an opinion on it. We need the information. How can we sort of formulate an opinion if we don't even have a perspective on what they have planned on?
I'll do my best.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. I think Ms. Ludlow, though, has brought up an aspect that's a little bit different than what we've seen with many of the other issues. We're certainly interested in the transit access and the transit piece of this puzzle. And there are many other pieces of the puzzle that we may or may not be interested in, but I think the one with stormwater is one that really does have an impact on our residents, direct impact on our residents, and it has a potential fiscal impact on the city government. And so in that case, I think specifically we might be at the level where it's transit access and stormwater. I don't know of any others that have that type of a potential fiscal impact on the city and also the impact on the residents that stormwater would. So,
Interesting. My take on it was exactly the opposite.
What's that?
I was thinking that with your example of the question about stormwater, that we didn't need to get into that right now because that gets into the specifics, it would seem to me, of a particular design and, the impervious surface and how they do that. And we know there is going to be some, but until you solve it seems to me, until you solve the transit access issue, getting into, where that they're going to be channeling a bunch of water in a certain direction seems beyond where you would be.
Where we are now.
And it just seems premature. I can see that being an issue down the road, but I can see right now saying that you were correct in not pursuing those questions about stormwater. It's just premature.
So collecting the information, that makes sense. I agree with you.
Sue.
If I could just reframe this a little, what I'm hearing is that in any negotiation, you first have an information gathering and information sharing phase before you actually try to negotiate a solution. And what I'm hearing is that the council is saying to Suzanne, go and do the information gathering piece, but we want to see that before we then decide what that next step is going to look like. And it just seems to me that she'll come back with that information, and then there will be more ability to discuss what that negotiation would look like, if any. Because right now we don't even know what UIA is doing. I don't think that it's a lack of Suzanne finding out what UIA knows. My impression from what's happening with the FTA submission is they don't know that there's been a whole period of, I don't know, paralysis, but certainly rethinking and reevaluating. And it's not just this whole question of a change in transit. It's in fact a change in housing.
Yeah.
Will these townhouses sell? Will they sell for the kinds of amounts that were originally being counted on?
Which were driven by the deal that was struck.
Exactly. And so none of us know really what this black box is yet. And I think it's actually very wise on the council's part to say, go get us more information before we move forward. From staff's point of view, just let me explain, it sometimes seems like it's a very long time before we can get the council meeting to tell us what you want to tell us. And so I guess part of what I would like to say is that when Suzanne comes back and says, I'm ready, that we get a council meeting fairly soon at that point to really give that further direction.
I think for the box that we find ourselves in, I would commit to putting it on an agenda within 1 to 2 weeks if that became necessary. We make room if you need direction. Other comments?
Yeah, I thank you, Susan, for Silver, for clarifying what I hope we all agree on, and that is that we're interested in data gathering in a broad way. And it sounds like I'm not in total agreement with others on the council as far as narrowing the focus of what we're immediately interested in. I'm thinking of broad interests as well, but thank you for that. I hope that we all agree that we're not going to hamper Suzanne's questioning or information gathering. Okay, good.
Do you need something else from us?
obviously, at some point, we'll hear something about the submission to FTA, and I'm sure that will be shared at that point.
And we moved beyond, no, we won't know about it till it happens, to we will know when it happens.
Exactly. We now have a commitment, I don't know if we can believe it, but we were told we have a commitment that we will get a copy of WMATA's submission when it's filed with FTA. Our office will, of course, immediately evaluate whether we want to say something additional to what we had said already. If you remember, we already sent in our submission because we were afraid we were going to, not know in time. So we'll supplement what we're saying, and if it's anything that we're not clear what authority we have to do with that supplement, of course, we'll ask you, the mayor, for a meeting.
And remind us again of the timing. Once, let's say they submitted tomorrow, then what's
There's no formal timeline because there's no procedure for comments against the submission.
But the FTA can decide in as short as?
Well, theoretically, immediately, but of course they'll take time to make their judgments.
And just as we're gone in August, they probably are too.
I would.
Don't assume.
They're more likely to be gone in August.
Or they might take
Staff may
August.
be there.
Or they might take August to make a decision, so that.
No, that's what WMATA does.
The truth is, our previous submission was entirely based on transit access issues, and my guess is so would be a supplement. Thank you very much. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we're adjourned.